Welcome to this conversation with my guest today, who is Ananta Kranti. Welcome, Ananta. How's it
Hi,
going?
hi.
How's
Thank
it
you.
going over there in England today?
Well, it's dark and cold, but all locked down, and it just actually, in my room, it's just the same as it always is.
Yeah. Last time that we spoke, you were in Thailand.
Yeah, that's very different.
Yes. So lots
Mm.
has happened since then. But
Uh-huh.
maybe we can just come up to speed with what are you focusing on right now? And what does that actually mean when you say self-realization?
Right. Um, just as you started calling in our previous conversation, I got the background image of the fields and the coconut trees and the ease and the flow of having all that relative freedom, right? So where I am right now, it's a very different story. I find myself in a situation that doesn't have all that relative freedom. I don't wake up in the morning and listen to falling coconuts and move in my own way, in my own pace. I'm now full speed with keeping up to all my responsibilities, which I didn't have then, right? So, which are very much in a kind of a lifestyle that I was 30 years away from and nothing to do with, kind of thing. So it's like I've been flipped into another reality. Here's England. Here's the setting. Totally different thing. So who am I within both experiences?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So self-realization, it's to answer that in one sentence, it's really when we question who and what am I, if we question that in the first place and we go deeper than the story of who I am and everything that's happened to me, and we go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper to the core of being, and to realize that in there is nobody in there. There is you can't find an entity in here. So, but what you find at the core is essential.
Mm-hmm.
So the essential being that I am, to actually recognize, because every baby comes in as that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So to recognize that ever present, unchanging, um, constant, whatever you want to call it, is the first beginning, in my view, is the first beginning of self realizing.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
all of these other experiences can be happening, but in my experience, it there isn't a fracturing off of identity, of identifying and attaching to the different experiences that happen as a identity for who you are. So you can stay anchored or rooted in that essential self and still deepen and attend to whatever is happening in the field around you.
Yeah, and at the same time, at the same time, like that doesn't disconnect from whatever the experience that's being had,
Yes.
right? So whatever the experience is, whether it's emotionality or activating some old patterning, or whatever the experience is, it's being like knowing myself within the contrast. So it's a very different thing to experience the whole range of experience as a separate entity, the egoic structures of a separate self called me, than to experience it as life itself.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because life itself has no problem actually with whatever it's feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no kind of uh, there is a feeling of whatever is here.
Mm-hmm.
There's no blocking.
Mm-hmm.
There's no numbing out.
Mm-hmm.
There's no. I'm at the moment right now. I'm trying to just like actually feel into and tune into um, how it is when I'm really getting like an activation.
Mm-hmm.
Like how is that? What difference does that make? That I know myself is that there's nothing for it to stick to.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing for it to stick to. It's happening and it's gone. It's happening and it's gone. It's a happening and it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. That's doesn't really cover what you're saying. Ask me in a different way.
Yeah, well, we can just continue with it because it sounds like, and we can see how this fills itself out. But that self-realization is a
Mm,
continuing deepening. It's not
mm,
a
absolutely,
one time.
absolutely.
And when I listen to you, what I'm hearing is that there was a certain time when you were living in Thailand and life
Mm,
was organized in a certain way, and there weren't a lot of things to bump up against. Like you had much more autonomy, perhaps. And
I
then,
had the freedom of being.
yeah. And life
Yeah,
now doesn't, you don't have that same kind of autonomy in the relative mundane life around you with all the ordinary tasks. Because I can
right
relate
now
to this very,
I have
very,
everything I don't want.
yeah. Well, because I relate to this, as you know, super well, because I
Yeah,
I have this ongoing 24 years, and when I had
yeah,
my babies, that was when the rubber hit the road for me, and I got to really
yeah,
find out what awakening is and
yeah.
how it walks and talks and lives and embodies itself.
Mm,
So I think what you're speaking about is self-realization as something that is a continuing unfolding and a deepening embodiment of the essential nature of who we are, which never changes, is always here, and
mm.
doesn't split off from any of the ongoing experience that happens. Rather, you're more there to be with it, let it be as it is, in the sense of, you said not blocking, but in my experience, I say sometimes there is an experience that happens that feels like blocking,
Mm.
or it feels like resistance temporarily, but that's part of it too.
That's part of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The funny thing about this is that to speak about it is you know because what I've found, because I've been speaking about it for 20 years or whatever, what I've found is it's such a thing because people like to then hold on to like a concept and make it, oh, it's like this and oh, it's like that, and it's not. It's just not fixable, and it's not, can't be conceptualized. It is free, right? So we're expressing something that is inexpressible,
Mhm.
right?
And
So
wouldn't you say too, when somebody comes to you, like
mm,
more of how you lead or point,
mm,
uh, that's more than giving a definition, like I asked you to define
absolutely,
self-realization. Like you can't
yeah,
really, like you said it, it's like,
yeah,
okay, let's hold on to a few words and then, pretend
yeah.
we
Like if
understand what
somebody was
the
asking me that question, I would collapse them and bring them into the experience, but I don't need to do that with you.
yes.
It's not like it's a yeah. So then to try to explain that, and I know that there are listeners, so um what does self-realization actually mean if I was going to answer that to say my mother, right?
Mm.
Let's just say my mother asking that and say, okay, well, who were you before you were my mother? Who were you before you were the name that you have?
Mm-hmm.
Because you didn't come into this life with a name. You know, you came into this life and then you were given a name, and then every experience was recorded to according to that name. That became a memory, that became a and then the identification with that's what the normality of the structure of the self is taking itself to be a collection of name and memory and form and experience. This is who I am, this is me. And so, as you know, like without diving all into that whole thing where that was all collapsed for me, was sitting in a jail when I had absolutely no role, right? So, being in silence 3 years or nearly 3 years, having nobody to relate to, then there's no sister, there's no female because there's no male, there's no there's just no role at all. Then what is actually left?
Mm-hmm.
What is left when there is no role to play? So you're just being here now and cannot deny that I'm aware. And so what else am I? I'm aware, even I don't have a name because I'm not getting called that. I'm getting called a number.
Mm.
So I'm not the name anymore. I'm a number. So what is actually here? And so that period of time of being a long period of time without any role and being a number left nothing but being aware now. So in that process, then everything that was being experienced, like waves of anguish and waves of fear, waves of regret, as the mind was running through its story, because it was continuing to, if you don't speak, the mind is still like it's doing the thing the mind does. So the waves of feelings were coming through this being aware. So, with an ongoing day and night constant experience of all those waves moving through being aware, at some point you just get used to there's a like it's like the ocean and the waves, right? So what really 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 completely um clarified that, like when I came back to the world and I was asked to be somebody,
Mm-hmm.
now there's a male in front of you, oops, here comes a female, right? I'm getting embarrassed, I can't look in the eyes, like what's this? And I'm not doing that, it's arising. So and then people are calling me the name they knew me as, and then the personality of that is reforming and responding to that name. Hang on, I'm not doing that. Where did that come from? And so, and then of course, like I started to experience triggers to the patterning that I hadn't seen for a few years. And then when those things started to get triggers, like, hang on a minute, I'm not actually doing this. I'm experiencing it, I'm feeling it, it's moving all through me, but that's not me. So, and that's very, 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 very clear to me, So then I saw the whole ego reform itself and start to play in the world, absolutely knowing that that is not who I am, and I cannot step in and be that. Sorry, I can't relate as that. So then how do I live that in this world with all that getting triggered and brought up into play? how do I now live in this world where everybody is pretending to be that? Which really was the beginning of the inquiry of, okay, at some point, it was clarified and confirmed, who am I? I am this, which is all this is arising in and passing through and knowing all experience. Okay, now all these activations, what do I do about that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so how does this all come together? And the patterning having a life of its own, the patterning having a whole life of its own, and part of the body mind, it's all there in the body mind. So one place gets touched and all this emotionality is coming. Now, what do I do about that? So the self-realizing is really to inquire within the midst of that,
Mm-hmm.
who am I really, and what does this patterning and this activation, what does it now need
Yeah.
from? Yeah. And so the beginning of the living inquiry of that is what came to me, because at that point there was no teacher around to actually guide me in that process of how that all comes together, which I now call the masculine and feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Like the masculine aspect of absolute awareness, and the feminine, or the energy and everything that's arising and dancing as Shakti, or whatever we want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So that inquiry of how does that come together, I couldn't actually find guidance on at that time in 1998.
Mm.
Right, so that became a living inquiry for me, like what needs to happen, because it's not going away.
Mm. So I like that what you said. So it sounds like the inquiry is around. So what does this need? Almost like it's attending to the creature, the humanness.
She needs to be met.
Yes, yes, she needs to be met.
She
So
needs to be met.
so to really see, so there's this like field of awareness happening, it's happening, and then something gets pinched or bumped up against or whatever, and it's seen. It's just seen. And then the questioning comes, so what is it that's needed here? What does she need?
The way that I like to express it, now, is that that's the absolute recognition of unchanging free awareness, which I'm calling the masculine, right, which is not an uncommon expression, and the dance of the relative play as Shakti,
Mm-hmm.
the feminine. So when she is not being met, when the let's say, for example, the emotional body is not entered, when I'm not fully in what I'm feeling, when I'm not totally here to be for it, when I'm not here to be the space for it, then there's no meeting. There's a separation between absolute and relative manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a separation. There's duality.
Mm-hmm.
That's right there is duality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, that's something that was raging in me in the beginning, because I was seeing that there were many kind of walking around going, I'm awareness and nothing touches this, and this is always free, which is the truth. And yet, what about when I'm feeling this abandonment?
Mm-hmm.
What about when I'm feeling this rejection is now in my body? Oh, it's just a story. Well, that didn't work for me. It
Yeah.
didn't work to say it's just a story,
Mm-hmm.
So the
It's
learning
in the
come,
it's in the muscle memory and in the patterning. So to just discount it as a story is in itself, it's a denial.
yeah,
And there's this part that can't numb out anymore. In the old
yeah,
days, when you and I both knew how to numb out, and many
yeah,
people do, all the different ways when you can turn away from her, whatever you want to call it, can turn away from the humanness and get
mm,
busy in another identity.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that doesn't, nothing meets. It was interesting what you said about the masculine, because I don't know if I quite grok that, because I think it would be good for us to maybe clarify that for the listeners, because I do feel in the field, especially of uh, non-dual spiritual circles, that there can be a very dominant, almost unhealthy masculine energy that's in the
mm,
field.
mm,
So I like the quality of awareness, the essence of who we are.
mm,
But also I feel in women teachers also that there is a relationship to the masculine that also still is healing in
yeah,
you
absolutely.
personally and in general. So maybe we
Mm,
can speak about that a little bit
yeah,
to just reframe that so that it might be
mm,
a little more understandable, a little more, digestible. Because when
mm.
we make
And
the
what do you
masculine
mean?
the frame, I think
Yeah,
that some people are not going to be able to quite digest that.
could you say that bit again?
If we make the masculine the frame,
Yeah,
which is what I heard you say, is
mm,
I think it makes it a little bit not so easy to digest for many people when
mm.
their
And
relationship
what do you
to the masculine is not healthy. And
right? What do you mean the frame when you say the frame?
you said that the she arising in the masculine, like
Yeah,
she is the
meaning in
feminine.
absolute awareness, like
Okay, let's
meaning
call it that then.
energy, energy. Let's call it
Yeah, let's
that.
call it absolute awareness then, because I think
Yeah,
that that's much more clear.
right.
Because in
Okay.
that are the energies of masculine and feminine both moving, coming into harmony or balance, and there can be a distortion in both
You
fields.
know, you know what came to me around 7 years ago, right? And I was finding myself in the struggle in relationship with man,
Mhm.
right? And which is not unusual, right? And I was always I was always calling him to be more present. I was always like, you're not present, and I was always wanting him to get more, to be more here. And we couldn't connect. And at some point, because I was doing some work with myself, and at some point, I came to see the disconnection within myself through shadow work. And I was on a sexual shadow work
Uh-huh.
journey. I came to see the false masculine within myself,
Uh-huh.
and how my feminine on the surface, the disconnect between that and my deepest, what I'm calling deepest masculine absolute awareness, right? I
Yeah.
came to see the disconnection. So deeply I'm knowing one thing, deeply I'm knowing something, but on the surface, I'm not aligning to that,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so that split between masculine, feminine, like in the language I'm using, here within me, reflecting outside in my relationship,
Always. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was such a struggle, that relationship. It went on for years, and my story was always about him, until I came to see that actually, truly, deeply, there is a knowing in me. There is a knowing really, 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 really deep, that on the surface, I'm not aligning to,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And that's the shadow feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Why wasn't I aligning to it? Why wasn't I aligning? And this really gets down to what our conversation was originally going to be about, right? Um, why wasn't I aligning to my deepest knowing and selling out in my feminine surface girl,
Yeah.
who's wanting love from the guy out there, who's wanting him to, hold her, be here for her,
Mm-hmm.
who's wanting from him, right? That aspect of feminine, the shadow around that, and the trading within that
Mm-hmm.
to get love outside, that disconnect was being reflected in that relationship.
Yes.
And it was really, really, really a light bulb moment that completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
It completely called me to what self-love
Yeah.
truly is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's
Because
great. That's really that's it right there. I just want to highlight that because I had the exact same experience too, like some time back. And really, it was relationship though. The this is what I love about just being in life as it is and not being off somewhere where you're kind of have things taken care of you, whether it be in an ashram or out in Thailand in your own little nook
I
and
was in the heal when we spoke, I was in the healing of that, learning
yes,
what
yes,
is self-love. I
yes,
was in the healing of that, applying and integrating what I'd recognized. It
yes,
wasn't easy. I had a burnout.
yes.
It wasn't easy.
Yeah. Well, let's
I
let's
crashed
move
and
into
burned.
that in a minute, but I just want to share this little vignette of an
Yeah.
experience for me. So I had been teaching for a while and I started leading retreats, and this work with the masculine and feminine was just becoming really, really strong. And I had some kind of a relationship going on. And the people around me were so I was inviting this person to kind of lead some of my events with me, a male, and then hearing from the people, especially women, like, oh, how great it is to have the masculine and the feminine, like really, kind of really externalizing it, and then feeling in myself like I needed that on the outside. And I
Yeah.
was really, like you said, giving away. You used another term, but I could feel I was giving away something that I didn't let myself yet recognize in myself. So call so there was this cloudy field of shadowy stuff that was disowning my own, power, my sturdiness, my backbone, the
Yeah.
ground that anchors in something that's
Yeah.
deeply fluid and rooted and strong, and the
Yeah.
energy of something soft is able to move in that. So I
Yeah.
was giving it all away. And when that
Mhm.
moment, like you said, crystal clear
Yeah.
came and I let that go, then I something embodied itself here with a sturdiness, with a clarity, with a doesn't mean that I don't want to be in relationship with people, not at all. But it was coming from a very different place then, not
Did
something
it? Did
that's
it?
needed to
Did it?
add on and to appear like
Right.
a certain
Did
way.
it require that you take a certain action that kind of placed that?
Yes. Yeah, I had, yes. It really, there was former early stuff too with my own father and my
Mm.
brothers that hadn't quite healed yet either in the conditioning. So
Mhm.
it was an intense time over a period of a year of looking at all those relationships and
Right.
how I still discounted something in myself and
Yeah.
put it out there for somebody else to do it for me. And yes,
Right.
so
Right.
a lot
Kind
happened.
these kind of psychological, part of what I discovered in that process was the voices in my head were the original imprints of the first masculine feminine imprint I got as a child.
Mhm,
So the relationship between my mother father dynamics was the masculine, the shadow masculine feminine,
mhm,
yeah, the shadow masculine feminine workings in my own
mhm,
patterning.
mhm.
And that there's no connection, there's no real connection in that.
Yeah, because
S-
that's your earliest intimate role
Yeah,
modeling,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's always there, and then we get to see that when we
yeah,
come close in the
yeah.
in this
You
relating.
start playing it out. You
Yeah.
get a kind of as a female, you get a guy figure in front of you, and it starts playing out, right?
Mm.
Because that's the way we have learned to relate to
Yes.
when we haven't realized deeper.
Mhm. Yeah, so that was a deepening. So go ahead. So then, and the deepening is, and let's hear what you have to say about that, is this: how do
Well,
I nourish and take care of myself? How do I nourish this?
there was a knowing in me that was so
Mm,
deep that, I was trying to figure out for a long time, should I stay in this relationship or should I go? Should I stay? Should I go? Should I stay? Should I go? And the reasons for me to stay were really for my little girl to get love and get taken care of and get all the things that she needs from man. He was love bombing, so the attention and the self value, the self worth,
mhm,
um, and in the deepest knowing was the truth that this is not
mhm.
you
Yes.
know and the knowing was so deep, but then this is something that really clarified is that knowing, which is a penetrating awareness, where
Mhm,
it's known, it's in a penetrating awareness. When this moves into the world of experience, it enters her. And so there is like a lovemaking in that. It's like a penetrating awareness moving in every experience.
mhm, mhm.
So there's no separation between the depth and the surface.
Yeah. Mhm,
And this is like the lovemaking of existence.
mhm,
This, this is this is how it revealed itself.
mhm,
And so once this knowing was there was no choice but to move that into experience, and that was the end of the relationship.
mhm. Yes.
All right. And within the end of the relationship, the falling and crumbling, which took a couple of years, the
Mhm.
falling and crumbling of all that feminine who needed the attention and wanted the love that he was, and all the things that she was based on.
Yeah, who thought she was incomplete.
Yeah, it started crumbling, and the real true invitation within that recognition was the only reason that this thing can play out is because at the core, the bridge between who I think I am and what I am, the core is the disconnection to self-love,
Mhm,
which is the source of where love is. That deeper than that there's no self-love, the source of love itself, there's a disconnection between my feminine and the source of love itself, which is what I come know now,
Mm-hmm.
the true feminine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So when this is reconnected, returning back to the source of love, because we love, where does this love arise from? When we're coming back to the source of love, this feminine is full of her own power,
Yes.
which doesn't need a man to tell her how,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't need all his attention to have self-worth,
Right.
doesn't need, she has her own self-worth. So this process I was in, I was in the healing of when we spoke.
Yes.
You know,
It feels like it's just like a real cleaning up. It's a
the
cleaning.
clean,
It's a
it's
clean
clean.
feminine. It's a
Yeah,
very clean feminine, that
it's
she's
clean. And you know what drops away with all of that? You know, I cannot deny like that my feminine were always in the growing up years let off a smell everywhere she went, you know?
yeah.
She let off a little smell behind her, like a trail for the
Yeah.
sniffers, you
Yeah.
know?
Uh-huh. Understand.
And all that cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I became clean in
Yes.
my relating with men in all relativity. There was no more any hints or possibilities or I didn't let off the smell,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and unless there would be something real true connection, then she can come. But the real place, from her own self-worth, from her own fullness, without a neediness, without the give me something to fill me up ness,
Yeah.
you know. And it completely changed everything. And self-love was what we were in the beginning talking about. And self-love is a living embodiment of who you really are as your real self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's no denial of her needs in
Mm.
her. She gives herself her needs.
Right. And it seems like in that process for me too, there's a discerning of what she even needs. Because
Right.
with that cleaning up happening, when it's not clean, when you're leaving that scent around and you're still sorting through conditioning, and there's that crumbling of those layers and layers and layers of early conditioning, then there can be confusion. I
There
know there
was.
was for me anyway, about what does she even need? What
Yeah.
where does
Sure.
what is
Sure.
the nourishment, in this in this body of life, this huge expanse of life, what really enriches the this deep knowing, so that it roots and anchors and roots.
Mm,
And for me, because I played a way of it took a while for a real softening to happen. you
exactly.
know there
Yeah.
was a very strong kind of self-reliant character, because even as much as I tried to get something,
Yeah.
thinking, the sense of incompleteness, even in this deep knowing, still this playing out
Yeah.
um, of some need, something going to get fulfilled, but
Yeah.
from a sense of lack, from a sense of not having that part realized fully yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Not integrated.
yes, not
Not
integrated. There you
integrated.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then well, I forgot what I was saying, but just like
As you were
learning,
saying,
learning what really learning what satisfies, where to put my attention,
Yeah.
where, what, it's kind of like certain doors really close. Not
Yeah.
the love is there, but it's like, okay, not going there, not going,
Yeah.
not going
Yeah.
there. And, there can be an openness still and a softness,
Yeah.
but much more of a clarity and no, thank you. But it
Exactly.
comes from a kindness and a softness, and it's clear that
Exactly.
that's not what my life is about. That's not my world.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, for me, was like a returning to myself.
Mm.
A returning to myself in this little wooden bungalow, which is where we had the conversation. A
Yeah.
returning to myself in a real, I was physically, well, I had a burnout around that time. Bef- a while before we spoke, I took a lot, I cut all my work. I just didn't work for a year. I didn't travel for a year. I stopped, because I used to do retreats all around Europe. I cut all of that, stopped absolutely everything, and just laid on the bed all the time, listening, listening, listening. And I
Hmm.
did a whole detoxing, I did a whole cleaning, and met all the places of loneliness
Mm.
and sorrow and all the things that she had been avoiding to feel
Hmm.
all through the years of, like filling up the space with relationship. So when relationship ends, then all of those places are taking us back, or took me back, right down to the root of the core wound.
Yes.
And resting in that and being with that and being the space to hold that. And, that was a long period of gently, gently, tenderly coming
Mhm.
back.
Have you been
Mm.
able to identify, um, I know, like, to speak about something exact and specific, because there's like, you peel one layer and then there's something else, another layer, there's something else, another layer,
Yeah,
there's something else. So can
yeah.
can you can you name a core wound that you really, showed itself like this?
Yeah, it wasn't something that I wasn't aware of. It was something that I was always aware of, where that split off from, the first heartbreak, the very first heartbreak in their life, and then going like deeper than that into whatever rejection, or like as it, went back and back. It wasn't new really what I was seeing. I was always aware of it. I just wasn't in contact with going and actually dropping into it,
Mm,
dropping into it,
mm,
dropping into it, and dropping through it, knowing these broken, tender, helpless, little, small places. It was really about the disconnect from self-love.
mhm,
It was really, really in that, the recognition that how many times all through the life, starting from this point of rejection, of feeling rejected,
mhm.
wherever that first took place, don't
Yeah.
remember exact, but all the places where I had overrode and
Mhm. Yeah.
filled that up with something else. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
mm,
I have found around that in my, just in relating and working with people for so long, and also having my children who have injuries, have wounding very, in a really strong way. And you're
yeah,
working with your dad now. So, you get to see a lot of things up close. So, what I have noticed is that core wounding for so many of us seems to show up where we're most sensitive, where we're triggered the most. So
mm,
so for me, I may have thought that I had attended to, my deepest wounding, the little orphans, that's how we speak about them in Hakomi, the little parts of who we are that haven't quite been met. And
Yeah.
and still there can be this deep, deep knowing and this recognition, but there's still humanity. There's
Mm.
we're really are each other. And
Yeah.
so I notice that mine is around violation. And when I see and sense violation happening
Yeah.
anywhere, I it touches so deep. Like recently, and at different times I can feel shattered. I can feel, and it's happening though also, as you were saying early on, in the difference. There's a difference between being touched by something and feeling the full humanness of the emotion of that, and suffering because of it. Like
Mm.
for me, it doesn't feel like a suffering. It feels like really strong, full on humanness happening
Mm.
from the depth of some deep knowing, but
Yeah.
related to my own core wounding around violation.
Yeah.
And I really
As you're
feel
saying that, I'm really connecting with
the,
invasion. The word invasion comes,
yeah,
like being overtaken and
yeah,
invaded.
power over.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what we're all, I feel in our global domain is this
Yeah.
power over of the unhealthy dominant culture. That
Yeah.
is the core wound of humanity. Power
Yeah.
over, power over, power over. And I'm so glad you're speaking, we are speaking of the healthy feminine, because there is the shadow of either masculine or feminine. If that
Yeah.
shadow doesn't clean itself, get cleaned and
Yeah.
be sturdy and rooted in its deep knowing, then there will continue to be this. We're not going to get leveled out. Like right now, there's a leveling. I feel there's the field is leveling, but there's
Mm.
been this power over
Mm.
forever
Mm.
ranking. And
Mm.
the feminine, when she's clean and healthy, she links, she
Mm.
connects, she
Mm.
brings us together. She
Mm.
she holds and cares. You know,
Yeah.
like in the way you were kind of undulating before. It's kind of like that. She's like the water caressing, just the
Yeah.
warmth.
Yeah.
So what you're speaking about is so important, because it's deep to get to that core wounding, and see
It's
how
such
it does
a
get
valuable time.
reflected out when we
Yeah.
when we
It's so
don't.
valuable.
Yeah.
So valuable. It's so like how we can just live the whole life kind of spinning in this uh, repetitive patterning of, yeah, I mean,
And even right now, to jump on the that what we see in the marketplace, because everything is online now, right? You have to,
mm,
like, I want to hear what you have to say about self-love around that. Like, to stay in your deep knowing and your self-love and not get caught up in the field of the commodity, making the feminine a commodity. Like that's like, that's not clean, because she her worth and her value is like, you can't sell her. And
right.
there's this short changing going on that isn't the remedy. It's beautiful that
Mm,
she is on display, to in a way. I
yeah.
don't know, I'm trying to language this in a way to be sensitive of
Hmm.
the value in what I see happening, but
Can,
also.
can you say it? Can you say it? Could you say it more like what that looks like to you? How that's displayed?
Yeah. Um, well, just kind of almost like with speaking in non-duality, where you can get the languaging and the concepts and the talk. So the same thing is happening in the field of the feminine. There's the languaging, the concepting, and the talk. And then it becomes a commodity, it
Yeah,
becomes this objectification once again that we
right.
can sell, and we're not really getting the depth, of what realization truly is, this deep, deep knowing and seeing and being in this that cleans out everything that isn't healthy.
In the messy rawness of all that she is,
Yeah,
rather than the showcase.
yeah, yeah. So I'm speaking about that, and I feel it's important that we, see that, because there are so many wonderful female teachers, yourself
Mm.
included, and many that have done their inner work, and like you say in your bio, walking the talk. And you get to really see you're able to walk your talk when you end up in a situation such as yourself. And when you have this day-to-day meeting with challenge, you really get to see where you haven't done your work. And I
Yeah,
see that in my family life all the time.
yeah.
Not that you need that, but there are many
It's
situations where
made,
people
yeah,
sit back,
yeah,
sit back on the old pedestal kind of thing, untouchable
yeah.
by life. And
Mm.
it's not happening there. And that's not helping the collective awakening. Not that, we have to be on a
Because
mission.
it paints a certain image and picture.
Does that make sense to you? So that's what I mean
Yeah,
when I speak about the clean feminine, and let's not make her a commodity.
yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, and for me, in my story, it was really like once I came through that process of self-love and returning to myself, then life went, okay, then now come right back in the family situation and put it here, you know,
Hmm.
right back, right in the heart of the family situation where I've been 30 years away, where all the patterning
Yes.
is just like right in my face, and they don't care that I've been away and changed my name and become somebody else. They're relating to
The memory of you.
the child they knew, you
Hmm.
know. And so all of that getting to play out now in the dynamics with the father daughter, all of that thing, and it's been a cleaning up
Mm.
in
Beautiful.
this,
Mm.
and still is. It's never over, is it?
No, it's not, is it? As long as you're living life, because like really, I mean, like when unity is living from unity includes everything. Yeah. So if you're here, the whole human
It's an
circle.
ongoing
Yeah.
deepening, realizing of what one really truly is as life itself in the midst of playing as this relative individual uniquely as that, embodying that. And that's to embody that. For me, I don't expect it to be, it's always been with, there's always been challenge, there's always been, an ever ongoing deepening. I don't expect that to stop, and it doesn't need to. That's the mystery is so, so, so,
Interesting.
it's
Yeah.
like how can we ever go like, okay, now I'm done, like.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's such a great crumbling. It's so humbling. I feel so blessed to have the opportunity to, just be a mom, to have the responsibility of other people's lives.
I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
No.
Yeah. Within your situation as a mother, in the most difficult and challenging way that could have played out, um, the realizing of yourself deeper than the mother of these children, how much difference has that made for you?
Hugely. I wouldn't be able to be in it. And my daughters aren't the problem, and their challenges are not they're not really problematic, because it just unraveled so many things around expectation, and it was more what I needed to sort through was the medical and the society and the special education and the agencies and all of these different um, places that I needed to start to navigate that I had
Right.
absolutely zero experience with, and all the different personalities, and then needing to, being dependent on other people coming into our home. So the in and out of different people. And, so it really kind of engaged me in a way to this self love that we're speaking of, to
Yeah.
uh, you know, really embody that even more. So
Yeah.
and not be brittle, you know,
Yeah.
and not
There's no escape.
protective. And because I needed to, like, be mama bear in many ways, with many different people coming in and wanting to make decisions about their lives, you know,
Yeah, that's
and
that violation again. Yeah.
yeah. And then people coming in with good intention, but maybe not knowing how to be in another person's home, and then projecting their own onto it. And again, intrusion, violation, all kinds of things around
Yeah.
boundaries happening. So
Yeah.
man, so what a bag of potatoes to sort yourself out in.
Yeah.
Just like everything possible got, bumped up
Yeah.
against. And
And the
I
huge
huge.
difference of you knowing your real self
Yeah.
within that is
Yeah.
what makes all the difference,
So,
doesn't
and
it?
if I didn't have a practice though to fortify that, because,
Mm.
I really feel when the awakening is authentic and runs deep, there isn't any forgetting. But you can come to places of just being really strung out with exhaustion,
Of
and,
course.
and all in resistance and just fatigue,
Yeah.
that it can feel like it's where is that knowing now?
Yeah.
And so the practice and the reminding and part of self love, I think, is really resourcing ourselves well. For me,
Yes.
having a friend like you, I can, call up and say, well, what the fuck, or whatever, and then it's like, and then just a little reminder, like part of self love, I think, is really that. Like, how do
Mm.
you resource yourself? Who are your resources? Who do you
Yeah.
call up and check in with on that,
Yeah.
28th hour where you're like, spent,
Yeah.
fu-
Yeah.
fully spent, right? You might need a little reminder, but it's right there. It's right
Yeah.
there. And the
Yeah.
fatigue, it's all happening to the biology. But
Yeah.
there's that part that's crystal clean and clear that is not touched
Yeah.
by any of it.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I've broken down over and over in my time here in the last 4.5 years. I've reached the point of I don't know how I'm going to go another day, and then going through that level of another level of breakdown and breakthrough.
Yeah,
And it's just like being willing to just meet what's here, isn't it?
it is. And also, I really feel it widens our capacity to, really put yourself in the place of another, and with the empathy. For
Compassion.
me, that's something that has grown,
Yeah.
tremendously, to put myself in somebody else's shoes. So,
Yes.
so if there is lingering judgments that come up, and critique, or like, or any kind of idea of how another person should be living their life, all of that's just emptied out. Totally, totally, because you just see, I mean, life can really be messy.
Yeah.
And you cannot say anything about anybody else until you really that old saying, walk a mile in someone else's shoes
Yeah.
before you have any opinion.
Yeah. And we've all got to do it. If we want to be free, we gotta walk all of it. And
Yeah.
it's really, there's part of the story that I don't put out so much, but the last year and a half I've been intensely assisting a process with my brother. He's disabled, and he has an extremely challenging living condition.
Mm,
And I've been assisting that. And I mean, to walk 5 minutes in his shoes,
mm,
I mean, that's just broken my heart open to a whole another level of compassion.
yeah.
Mm,
I can even really feel how that touches you.
it really does, and it's ongoing.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's ongoing, and I'm dealing with all the authorities, like you said. I deal with the authorities, the MPs,
Hmm.
all the people, because he
Yeah.
can't, and
Yeah.
so
And that's something that somebody has to do, and great that you can show up and help him with that. And I will be, doing my daughters are conserved, meaning they're not capable of making decisions for themselves.
yeah,
They're 24 years old. And, so I will continue to be that person that shows up and also needs to continue to deal with these different agencies that and come and interrogate at least once a year to,
really,
oh yeah, oh yeah, social
they come
service.
and interrogate because of the upkeep of benefits and stuff like
Yes,
that.
yes, to be sure that you're still eligible.
Wow.
And I'll be like, well, no, Libby hasn't jumped out of her wheelchair to go to the toilet yet or to feed herself. And it hasn't quite changed. Like I had services discontinued just recently that I had to go through all this paperwork again. There was some kind of mistake. They had the wrong phone number and they said they didn't hear from us. And we needed to know that Libby still needed support in order to be able to live in the home. And her services got discontinued because they left a message at the wrong phone.
The world is sick, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, it's insane how there are actually people living in, and that this is people who, when we talk about what is self-realization, to live that way and play those roles
Hmm.
means total disconnection from true self. You just couldn't be in the world and play those kind of roles
Yeah.
and be connected to your real self. You just couldn't.
No, and it changes too for me. It has, I have to say, I have to pat myself on the back a little bit because it hadn't in the beginning, especially, it was not easy. And so many times in the education system, especially in special education, in the medical system. And I do remember, and I could notice myself, hardening,
Of
protecting,
course, of course,
and
yeah.
and
Naturally.
also it somehow it continuously shifted because as I did the cleaning up and felt that self-love and empowerment, I got more sturdy in myself. And when I could be sturdy, I could be soft. It was
Mm,
when I wasn't sturdy in myself that I had
mm,
to put up a guard, a self-reliant, protective
armor.
kind of mechanism because I wasn't rooted enough in myself to feel anchored and strong in my own back.
Mm.
So
It's a lot. It's
that's
a lot. They're not.
it's
They're
very,
not.
very
It's
different.
it's huge, Prajna. What you've
Yeah.
what you live and what you've lived these last 24 years. I don't know before that, but it's huge. It's absolutely huge, and this is really where self realization has its value. It's not sitting in some place on some seat claiming to have realized something, and now I'm in some other plane where, you know, life is hunky-dory. It's in
Mm-hmm.
the absolute thick shitness of this human mess, and realizing right in there, that's where the value is just, it just really, really
Mm-hmm.
is immense. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
immense.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be self-realized, sitting in some comfortable, not that I'm not, you know, there are people who have it that way by their own, we can say, karma if we want, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but it's just not the destiny of embodied
Yeah.
self-realization,
Yeah,
I
I
feel.
say that. Yeah, that's half the journey, that kind of transcendence, which is really lovely and beautiful, to really be in these spacious bliss. That's still happening. But when it gets to be embodied and that can function in your life, I mean, for me, it feels so good that I can meet with all these different agencies now and like bring a flower to them, because it's like, wow, they're working in the constraints of a messed up, system. The more that I've learned how dominant culture has infiltrated everything,
Yeah.
and the people that are working hard to provide resources, they're working on shoestrings and doing their very best.
Wow.
So to really be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, they're not
Right.
the enemy.
Right.
Nobody is the enemy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we're the people for the
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
really. And
Yeah.
and it is this realize, when we wake up to see that we're not a person and they're not people either, we don't hold them to that. We don't hold them to a
Exactly.
personality,
Yeah.
a conditioned point of view.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
because we see beyond the play,
yeah,
and
and how they
that
how they
freely.
just how they just are, still on a string here, still kind of being puppeteered around a bit. But it's only through our kindness that we can support those puppet strings to kind of be severed a bit, perhaps.
And that's where there's an unconditional acceptance that comes in without having to do acceptance. It's just like there's an unconditional already acceptance of life as it is. I mean, there are places that doesn't accept and wants to make a problem here, there, and everywhere, but it is as it is, and that is such a profound statement at the end of the day,
Yes.
right?
Oh, at the end of the day. Yes. And maybe that's a good way to start to wrap this up, because that is for me the most important thing, is the end of the day.
Right.
It's like, I mean, I got to be with my mom at the end of her day, you know, and it's like, really, when the lights are going out,
Yeah.
like, let's even just like imagine for now, for a moment, and you probably don't need to imagine much, but here it is at the end of the day. And if
Mm.
there were a piece of wisdom, a jewel of wisdom or nourishment, what is the most important thing for a person to consider? Maybe even just it's that question, what is the most important thing? Because that kind
Yeah.
of guides how we
Yeah.
spend our time and what
Yeah.
we make as a priority. And so then
Exactly.
when it comes to the end of the end of the day isn't about our qualifications or our resume, but it's about,
Exactly.
how do people remember us? What is
Yeah.
how did we touch people? Maybe I just said it, but let's hear from you.
For me, it's really the willingness to die, the willingness to die, the willingness to keep dying
Mm, yeah.
is where we really get to live. You know, when we can really die to the separation, when we can really like die before you die. I mean, that's quite a well-known statement, but it's such a truth, and it really is, for me, it really is like the gift of this life, to actually take every situation, to be willing to die before I die, and learn for that moment, to actually be able to let go of this body life.
Yeah.
As the climax, like to really be able to let go into what we call death, like the dying to the separate identity constantly is it is as it is, right?
And that separate identity, being the places that we still get hooked in and that keep us awake at night, that keep us in the dark, that keep us in the shadow. It's like, for me, it's really like, at the end of the day, how do I want to be remembered? What was the most important thing? All my accomplishments, how much money I made, or anything like that.
Right, exactly.
But how did I show up?
Exactly.
Because, yeah, I love that.
I want to be
I love that die before you die, but like, let's break that down. Like, what does that mean? Like, what really matters in this life? What's the most important thing? And a day to day, for me, especially in this pandemic, right? Because there's such an influx. You can open up the computer and you can feel like you live in a big city, and there's massive traffic. I mean, depending on what you have open, it's like, okay, what am I going to give my attention to? Boop, 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 boop. It's like, wow. And I'm saying this now because I know that happens for a lot of people. And there's this and there's that, because we're in the pandemic. And so people are confronted by whether there's a lack of connection, or there's loneliness, or all of the things that we get to be with when we don't have our routines of whether it be meaningful, which hopefully they are, or ways in which we distract. So here is this internet that is addictive. There's studies have been shown that it is addictive. It gets the dopamines, going, and it's false connection. There's so much that happens, so, and I have to admit that I've gotten sucked in at different times, and I'm pulling myself back, like, whoa. And the way that that's happening is by asking this question: what's the most important thing, and what really matters? Because you don't need to take every single thing that's out there,
Absolutely
or
not.
offer everything that's out there. Yeah,
For
but
me,
what matters?
it's the sweetest intimacy. It's like being with the sweetest intimacy of what life is as the beloved. Like within the intimacy of this moment.
Yeah.
As the beloved.
Yeah. And we know when we feel intimacy, we're the subject, right? We're always the subject of our experience. And we can be so entrained to be the object, the product, right? But like when something is touching, yeah? Oh. Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to end. I'm going to end the recording, but stay on for a moment so we can laugh a little bit more. But Ananta, thank you so much. This has been such a delight to speak with you again, and I'll see you tomorrow.